It's 10 o'clock. I'm Matt Barbett. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story, falling short of the standards required over the tax paid on a new home. Angela Rayner is forced to resign. The Deputy Prime Minister's departure is the most significant since Labour came to power, triggering a major government reshuffle by her boss. There's a new Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister as Sir Keir Starmer either sacks or moves half of his cabinet. Amid fireworks, Reform's leader tells his party conference Labour is deep in crisis, and Nigel Farage says there could be a general election in just 2 years' time. Also tonight, the destruction in Gaza, the latest target of Israel's military offensive, as Hamas releases pictures of 2 more living hostages. From the courts of Wimbledon to a secret life in the classroom, the tributes to the Duchess of Kent, who's died at the age of 92. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through until midnight. Good evening. Just 2 days ago, Angela Rayner told our political editor she hoped people would see she hadn't intended to deceive or be hypocritical when underpaying tax on a flat she bought. At the time of that interview with Beth Rigby, she was the Housing Secretary, Labour's Deputy Leader and the Deputy Prime Minister. Today, she resigned from all 3 roles after an investigation by the Prime Minister's ethics advisor. And that's triggered some huge changes to Keir Starmer's team, with a new Foreign and Home Secretary and many more members of the Cabinet moved. In a moment, our Deputy Political Editor will look at those changes in detail. But first, on a momentous day for the Labour government, here's Beth Rigby's report.
Friday morning in Downing Street, waiting for the verdict on the Deputy Prime Minister's future. And by noon, her fate sealed. Sky News understands that Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, is to leave government. I am literally getting that as I'm speaking to you. A decision neither Rayner nor the Prime Minister wanted to make, but in the end there was no other option after Keir Starmer's ethics advisor found his deputy had broken the ministerial code. In a letter to the Prime Minister, Laurie Magnus said she cannot be considered to have met the highest possible standards of proper conduct. Angela Rayner deciding to resign, saying in a letter to the Prime Minister, "I deeply regret my decision not to seek additional specialist tax advice. I take full responsibility for this error." Keir Starmer, in a highly personal touch, wrote back by hand, calling his former deputy a true friend as he accepted her resignation. He wrote, "Although I believe you have reached the right decision, you have given your all to making the Labour government a success." It was a controversial flat purchase in this block that cost Angela Rayner her job, after it emerged that she had incorrectly paid a lower rate of stamp duty on the seaside flat and owed the taxman an additional £40,000. She admitted her error in an interview with Sky News earlier in the week as she tried to fight on.
Well, I made a mistake based upon the advice that I relied upon, that I received at the time, and a leading expert has now said that advice was wrong. People make mistakes, but I conducted myself in trying to do the right thing, and I hope that people can see that.
But her critics clear she had to go.
We think it is really important that lawmakers shouldn't be lawbreakers, but also the Housing Secretary should be able to have her housing issues in order. If they're going to be putting property taxes on the rest of us, then they need to come clean about their own affairs.
It's clear Angela Rayner's position was no longer tenable. I just hope the government can now move on to help the millions of people in our country who are having a tough time. The cost of living is hitting so many people.
Soon after Rayner's resignation, the Prime Minister began a radical reshuffle with a complete rewiring of his cabinet.
Are you pleased to be Deputy Prime Minister, sir?
David Lammy, the new Deputy Prime Minister, moving from the Foreign Office to Justice Secretary.
Are you pleased to be Home Secretary?
As Shabana Mahmood was promoted to Home Secretary, tasked with tackling the small boats crisis.
Did you fail on small boats?
And Yvette Cooper moved to the Foreign Office as the government's leading diplomat. Angela Rayner out of government is not what Keir Starmer wanted. She is undoubtedly a massive loss. But in this moment of jeopardy, the Prime Minister has turned a crisis into a catalyst for change, and he has used it to completely overhaul his top team in an effort to reinvigorate a flagging government. Now, for months, he's been under fire for being too careful and cautious, but today he has rolled the dice and changed the top team in an effort to reset the government and get back to winning ways. Angela Rayner no longer sits at this table, but she is bound to remain a powerful figure in the Labour Party and British politics. And as she departs for the backbenches, Keir Starmer will hope his fresh top table can restore some of his power too. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
At the start of this week, no one would have predicted that by the end of it, half of Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet would have either moved role or been sacked. So do the changes following Angela Rayner's resignation represent panic from the Prime Minister or a long-awaited chance to reform that top team? Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates.
The sensational sacking of this woman left 3 positions vacant, prompting this, a massive cabinet reshuffle that we weren't expecting this morning. Now, to give you a sense of the scale of this reshuffle, I'm going to show you a picture of Keir Starmer's first cabinet, and let's just look at all the people who are no longer in their jobs or in different jobs. Darren Jones, Annalisa Dodds is out. You can see Angela Rayner's gone. She lost a bit of her brief. She's changed jobs. She's gone. You can see Ian Murray gone there, and some of this lot, they changed their jobs too. So much change, mostly happening today. But will it solve Keir Starmer's problems? Well, let's have a look at what he's done. First big appointment was to give this guy, David Lammy, Deputy Prime Minister. A bit of a compensation for losing the Foreign Office. He's gone to the Justice Department, slightly lower profile, slightly more tricky, slightly less glamorous, but nevertheless, he looked pretty happy when he was walking up Downing Street. But let's look at the big picture of the reshuffle. This woman, Rachel Reeves, we were told before the reshuffle even started she was safe. Now, almost everybody else has been reshuffled, so Keir Starmer thinks there are better people in that job. Quite a lot of criticism of her, but she has left untouched. So if not her, what are the problems that needed solving and who are the beneficiaries? Well, here's a big one. And this is the key appointment of the reshuffle. Home Secretary has gone to the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, who is on the right of the party. She's into fiscal discipline, financial discipline, and she is going to have to find a way of taking on Reform UK's positions on small boats and migration. Expect tougher language. But is Keir Starmer jettisoning the policy? It's unclear, but Yvette Cooper is out because she has gone to the Foreign Office. Now, Yvette Cooper, not known as a foreign affairs specialist, yes, she's got positions on Gaza, and also she negotiated a treaty with France over small boats. But interesting to see what she does on this brief, given she spent years in opposition as well as government doing home affairs. Now let's look at a big and important change that we've got, and that is the arrival at the front rank of cabinet of this guy, Pat McFadden, for years a backroom veteran. He's now Work and Pension Secretary, also takes on the skills brief from the Education Department. Why does this one matter? Well, before the summer, they tried to take some money out of the welfare budget and it failed. But now this guy, well, he's a reformer. He's the kind of person who might give it another go. And it seems like that's exactly what Downing Street want to do. There could be a big fight, which also explains the next appointment, which is this one, Johnny Reynolds to become Chief Whip. Now, that is the job which liaises between Downing Street and Labour MPs. Labour MPs pretty unhappy. They revolted before the summer. Can Johnny Reynolds smooth that over? He might be a bit disappointed to lose the business brief, which I think he was enjoying, but he now holds the key role, linchpin between Number 10 and the rest of the party. His job has gone to this guy, who is a big, close ally of the Prime Minister, Peter Kyle. He did the technology brief, but he's now moved into a role that will see him help negotiate on tariffs. Absolutely critical to the economy, this job, big friend of Rachel Reeves. So there's some of the key moves from this reshuffle. But the question is, has he dealt with the real problems or just moved the deck chairs around after the departure of Angela Rayner? It is a perilous moment for him.
That's Sam Coates. As we've been hearing, Angela Rayner held a unique position in the government and the Labour Party, not just for her politics, but also her life story. The mother at 16 from a council estate who rose to one of the most powerful positions in the land. Our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, has more.
An outspoken and unconventional politician, Angela Rayner was never afraid of taking the fight to her opponents.
They're using the rules as it seems fit for them, and actually now people are seeing it's one rule for them and one rule for everybody else.
Angela Rayner's route to the top of government was an unusual one. Born in Stockport, she left school at 16 whilst pregnant and with no qualifications. After training as a care worker, she became a union official before then joining Labour. Speaking before she entered government, she said she initially found Parliament an alien environment.
When you got to Westminster, did you just think there's no one like me here? Was it lonely or difficult?
I didn't understand that it was such a big network here. I never, I've been to London a couple of times as a union rep to our headquarters for the union, but before then, I mean, when I was growing up, my world was 3 streets on the estate I grew up in. I didn't even go to Manchester. I lived in Stockport, which is a town just outside of Manchester. Manchester was a huge thing, never mind London, never mind, politics and government. But the driving force that I've always had is about trying to do the right thing. My nana taught me that. She said, always do your best. Always do your best. And I've always tried to do the right thing. And when I became pregnant at 16, I wanted to prove that I could be a good mum. I wanted to love my child and do the best I can for him.
First elected to the Greater Manchester seat of Ashton-under-Lyne in 2015, Angela Rayner was appointed Shadow Education Secretary by Jeremy Corbyn. Seen as on the left of Labour, she was one of a handful of MPs who backed him when he fought a leadership challenge after the EU referendum. She remained in his shadow cabinet throughout his time in office and through the Brexit battles, establishing a reputation for plain and colourful speaking.
It came out of the first day of talks and the Europeans got exactly what they wanted and, we rolled over and let them tickle our belly.
Tipped as a leadership candidate, Angela Rayner instead ran and was elected as deputy to Keir Starmer after Labour's 2019 election loss. The two had their ups and downs, Starmer trying, though ultimately failing, to demote her after disappointing local election results in 2021. After a power struggle, she landed a bigger job and solidified her position as a popular and influential voice on the left of the party. But she sometimes went too far and was criticised later that year for calling Conservatives scum.
You said last night, we cannot get any worse than a bunch of scum, homophobic, racist, misogynist, absolute pile of banana republic, Etonian piece of scum. Is that the kind of civility that the Starmer-Rayner Labour Party envisages?
Well, look, that was post-watershed, as we'd say, with a group of activists at an event last night.
She eventually apologised for those comments, but didn't shy away from confrontation in the Commons.
Mr. Speaker, I know that it is great to be here with the Right Honourable Lady, the Shadow Secretary of State, for the future of work. We know the future of the job that she has in mind.
Mr. Speaker, I've heard on the grapevine there might be a vacancy for Prime Minister soon, so maybe I should have aspirations.
Rayner was prominent in the election campaign as someone who could speak to the party's heartlands, a contrast to Starmer, the reserved former barrister. In government, she was made Deputy Prime Minister, as well as her cabinet job overseeing changes to planning and house building and reforming workers' rights.
My mission is not just to build houses, it's to build homes, because we cannot build at any cost. These new homes must be warm, secure, and most importantly, safe.
But questions about her property arrangements started to emerge even before the election. Inquiries by the police and the tax office into homes she owned in the northwest seemed to put her in the clear. It was the purchase of a house on the south coast that proved her undoing, with the Standards advisor finding that she had acted in good faith but had not taken enough care to ensure she paid the correct tax. This touched on personal matters, her divorce and arrangements to support her disabled middle son. She said the strain on her children had been unbearable. Brought down by the type of scandal she had so often called out, Keir Starmer paid warm tribute, saying she would remain a major figure in our party. Once talked of as his successor, the door to a comeback still left ajar. Tamara Cohen, Sky News.
Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is in Downing Street now. Evening to you, John. Look, a lot of change in the cabinet, not many newcomers coming in, though. So does it signify any sort of change in direction for the government?
12 appointments in all, 3 people, including Angela Rayner, leaving the Cabinet. The other 2 are Lucy Powell and Ian Murray, the Scotland Secretary. The Prime Minister talked earlier in the week about phase 2 and a reset. Well, Tories are mocking that now after this big shake-up just a few days later. What the key appointments really, and this evening Downing Street have released some photos of ministers meeting the Prime Minister inside 10 Downing Street. Well, let me just tell you about some of the key appointments. Well, first of all, Yvette Cooper. Now, she has been Home Secretary. She gets the Foreign Office. She didn't seem too pleased about that when she came up the street earlier. Her move will probably be seen as a view in Downing Street that she's failed on the big policy of stopping the boats, shutting the asylum hotels and so on. So she gets a sideways move to the Foreign Office. She did years ago work for Bill Clinton, and she was Shadow Foreign Secretary under Ed Miliband. Well, the former Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, well, he looked delighted when he came up the street earlier. He gets moved to the Justice Secretary, but as a consolation prize, he gets to be Deputy Prime Minister. This has happened before. It happened when Boris Johnson wanted to make Liz Truss Foreign Secretary. He did it to exactly the same thing to Dominic Raab, made him Justice Secretary, consolation.
Well, I'm sorry, we seem to have lost our connection to John there at Westminster. Moving on, the Labour government is deep in crisis and there could be an election in just 2 years' time. That was the prediction from Nigel Farage today, speaking at his party's annual conference, with Reform riding high in the polls still. Our political correspondent Rob Powell was at the conference hall in Birmingham, and a warning that Rob's report contains flash photography.
Hi, Nigel! Stop, please! Political rough and tumble tends to follow Nigel Farage. The Reform leader stepping into conference, having claimed former Tory minister Nadine Dorries as his latest defector.
Mr Farage, you are home for failed Tories now.
Well, I think Nadine has been rather successful in life, don't you?
A party on the up and hungry for more.
Any more defections today?
Not today, not today.
Done for the day.
Just give it a couple of weeks.
A far cry from the ramshackle Farage-led affairs of yesteryear, Reform wants to frame this as the moment the party professionalises. Though unexpected sights can still creep in, while events in Westminster also found their way to Birmingham.
So we have been expecting Nigel Farage's big leader speech later this afternoon. We've just been told it's been brought forward by 3 hours and is about to start now. Reform clearly trying to seize the moment, given the news of Angela Rayner's resignation, and put their leader front and centre.
Never knowingly unsubtle, Nigel Farage not missing his chance.
And it screams to entitlement. It screams to a government that, despite all the promises that this would be a new, different kind of politics, is as bad, if not worse, than the one that went before.
The great disruptor now applauding those he once attacked.
And I'm proud to welcome her onto the stage now.
Nadine Dorries, once a close ally of Boris Johnson, now declaring the Tories dead. The Reform leader insisting his party is no second coming, but something new.
I promised you a year ago I would professionalise the party. Have a look around you. Have a look at this conference.
Allies also putting the boot into the government.
Complete chaos. They've lost their Deputy Prime Minister. They're all over the place. And
you've had a fair bit of chaos in your party too, though.
There's nothing chaotic about this.
We have got some really high-quality people coming in, people that want to be part of this great movement. So we 100% will be ready for government when the next election comes.
Would Reform bring more stability, given you've had a bit of chaos?
It's not difficult, is it, with this bunch we've got in at the moment? There's no stability there at all. We've seen what's happened today with Angela Rayner. We've seen the state they've put this country in just a year. Just imagine what state we're going to be in 3 years' time. You talk about stability, you're having a laugh.
So what do members make of it all?
The top brass say we want to show that we're a party ready for government. Do you believe that that's the case?
I think it will be. I think it's going to take a lot more. They're starting to get people into the party now who would be able to run the country.
We've seen Nadine Dorries come across today. Are you a bit worried that taking in ex-Tories, reform starts to look like what came before?
I think there's enough of other people that were here beforehand. I also do think it's important to start to try and get something new. So I'm hoping that it won't be a flood from other parties.
A more professional team, yes, but these are still political tactics that have been deployed over decades.
I can't win, can I?
For now, it all seems to be hitting the mark. Rob Powell, Sky News in Birmingham.
Israel's military continued its assault on Gaza City today, with the country's defence minister warning that when the door opens, it will not close. He was speaking as Hamas released a propaganda video showing 2 of the surviving Israeli hostages above ground rather than incarcerated in a tunnel. The family of one of the men, Guy Gilboa Dalal, said he and his fellow captives must be brought home. Our Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons has more.
This building, a landmark in Gaza City. Gone in a matter of moments, collapsing amid a swirl of debris and dust. The people who lived and worked here were given just enough time to flee after the Israeli military phoned a resident and told them to raise the alarm.
They sent a warning to the residents on the 8th floor, telling them the tower was going to be brought down. Word spread quickly, with people warning each other to get out, as well as alerting those in the surrounding area.
There was a large circuit of tents around this tower, and nobody knows how many people are now missing. But what's clear is that Israel's offensive to take Gaza City is stepping up on this, the 700th day of the war. A milestone marked by Hamas releasing a video showing one of the 20 hostages who remains alive. His family agreed for this to be broadcast to see how captivity has left Guy Dalal traumatized and gaunt.
We want to go back to our families. There are explosions and gunfire. Please take us back home.
Around 1 million people are still in Gaza City. Israel is telling them to head south to seek sanctuary. These are exhausted people who've already endured death, destruction and famine. They're reluctant to be displaced again.
Moving south is out of the question. We'd rather die here in the north. If life in Gaza City is already unbearable, how could we survive there? You have to pay rent just for bare land with no tents, no food or water, no toilets, nothing. It means starting from zero. And if we can't rebuild here, how could we possibly start over there?
There is no sign of a ceasefire in Gaza City, but many indications that an onslaught is beginning. Israel's defense minister says the gates of hell are opening. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Jerusalem.
2 of the 3 British victims of the Funicular crash in Lisbon have been named tonight. They are 36-year-old Kaylee Smith and 44-year-old William Nelson. Ms. Smith is understood to be a graduate of Manchester's Arden School of Theatre, where Mr. Nelson worked as a director. 16 people were killed and 22 others were injured in the crash that happened around 6 o'clock in the evening on Wednesday. 11 of those who died were tourists. Portugal's Prime Minister has described the incident as one of the biggest tragedies of our recent past. Donald Trump has signed an executive order renaming America's Department of Defense as the Department of War. The move also means Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth will be able to refer to himself as the Secretary of War. The organisation is often called the Pentagon due to, as you can see, the shape of the building that it's based in. The actor John Alford has been found guilty of sexually assaulting 2 teenage girls aged 14 and 15. Jurors heard the 53-year-old, known for his roles in London's Burning and Grange Hill, assaulted the girls while they were drunk following a night at the pub. He denied all charges, but was found guilty after 13 hours of deliberation. A former Olympic horse rider who was beaten by her partner, who then went on to kill, has spoken to Sky News about what she calls the tolerance of violence against women in Northern Ireland. Nearly 30 women have been killed in the last 5 years, a rate amongst the highest in Europe. Abigail Lyle's abuser went on to stand trial for the murder of show jumper Katie Simpson, the subject of a new Sky documentary. Our Ireland correspondent Stephen Murphy has this report.
For decades, this place was synonymous with violence. Before a brighter era began, now a new dark reputation is being earned. Northern Ireland can be a very dangerous place to be a woman. Since 2020, 28 women have been violently killed. Per capita, one of the worst rates anywhere in Europe. Killed while pregnant with a baby boy. Shot to death with their teenage kids. They've been killed by their husbands, by their partners, even by a grandson. Abigail survived. She was attacked by her former partner, well-known equestrian Jonathan Creswell. He was given a 6-month jail term for beating Abigail. Released, he was accused of murdering another woman, show jumper Katie Simpson, in 2020, claiming she took her own life.
You definitely have survivor's guilt. And that was something that I really dealt with after Katie, because I thought, why am I here and she's not? All my violent interactions with Johnny, I every time I felt like he could have killed me. Every time. Every single altercation was absolutely terrifying.
The killing of Katie Simpson is the subject of a new Sky documentary, Death of a Show Jumper. Creswell took his own life during his murder trial. Journalist Tanya Foles was instrumental in alerting police that Katie's death was suspicious. She says the situation in Northern Ireland is dire.
Seems like an epidemic anyway, and it's not getting any better. If the number of women who are being murdered in their own homes by a partner, if that was the number of police officers being killed on the streets of Northern Ireland, there'd be uproar.
Susan Lagdon carried out research showing 98% of women in Northern Ireland have experienced violence or abuse in their lifetime.
So I can't say that there's a single reason. I'd probably describe it as a perfect storm. We're looking at a multitude of things that are accumulating together to create an increased risk for women and girls. This is where, of course, we can't get away from our history as civil unrest and violence within society is going to create a sense of normalisation within family homes. We also have a general distrust in our authority, and so reporting and help seeking can actually put people at risk.
So could generational fallout from the Troubles partly explain the prevalence of violence here?
Northern Ireland is a post-conflict society, and I think there's a lot of, probably some form of tolerance or desensitivity towards violence. And then I think there's also a little bit of that attitude of, it's not your business, don't get involved, turn a blind eye, you don't want to get involved with the authorities. That's probably still there from the times of the Troubles.
For years, there have been calls for legal reform, specifically in sentencing.
The system is not working. It needs tightened up significantly. Sentences need to be meaningful.
In a statement, the Lady Chief Justice of Northern Ireland told us that the judiciary are aware of the devastating impact on families experiencing domestic abuse. The sentencing framework is set in legislation by the Department of Justice, and recent legislation means when sentencing, a court must treat domestic abuse as an aggravating factor that increases the seriousness of the offence. The Northern Ireland Executive has launched a strategy for ending violence against women and girls. But this region's recent femicide record will take some time to arrest. Survivors like Abigail have a simple but chilling message.
It's really sad to say, but women are taking the brunt of it because they're easy targets.
Stephen Murphy, Sky News in Belfast.
You can hear more from the people involved in Katie's case in Sky's new original documentary. It's called Death of a Show Jumper. You can watch it on Sky Documentaries this Sunday. It will also be available to stream on Now. To millions, she was the reassuring royal face who handed over the trophies at Wimbledon for many years. But there was much more to the Duchess of Kent, who died aged 92 late last night. For more than a decade, she taught music at a state primary school, known simply as Mrs. Kent, or Kath to the other staff. Our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, has more.
The Duchess of Kent, rarely seen in public in recent years, lived a fascinating life. In 1961, Catherine Worsley, as she was known, married Prince Edward, Queen Elizabeth's cousin, insisting that they tie the knot near her home in Yorkshire at York Minster. They went on to have 3 children. Over 30 years, she was a committed working royal. Her support for the children's charity UNICEF taking her on trips all around the world. She became a well-known face at Wimbledon, attending every year with the Duke of Kent, who was president of the All England Club, and helping to hand out the trophies. A photograph of her comforting Jana Novotná on centre court made all of the newspapers. But in the 1990s, she decided to step away from official duties and instead started working as a music teacher at a school in Hull, where she was simply known as Mrs. Kent.
I laugh a great deal with the children, but they also know that I respect them, and that's another thing because they learn to respect each other.
She went into the staff room, she made herself a cuppa like everybody else. You could see that her passion was she just wanted to be a teacher, just like everybody else within our community, and make a difference to children's lives.
Her determination to help children from less well-off backgrounds really came through in the charity she set up, Future Talent.
Often in her life, she would do things very quietly, whether it was to help somebody who was dying in a hospice or going to Lourdes in the south of France on pilgrimage to help look after the sick there. I mean, she did so many different things in this very quiet but genuine way, not saying, look at me, just her wanting to help other people.
Her decision to convert to being a Catholic in the 1990s, the first royal to do so since the Act of Settlement in 1701, also thrust her into the media spotlight. She also very openly talked about having miscarriages and the depression that it caused. The marks of respect were clear at Buckingham Palace, with flags flying at half-mast and a notice placed on the gates. Her funeral is also likely to be held in the coming week, with senior members of the royal family expected to pay their respects. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, I'm joined by the political commentator Benedict Spence and the Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface. Among the stories, we'll be discussing this take on Angela Rayner's resignation from the Daily Mail. They call it Nightmare on Downing Street. We'll be right back.
gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live. Joins us live all in one place, and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what is making the headlines with the political commentator Benedict Spence and the Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface. They'll be with me from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages. And as you might imagine, one story certainly dominates the agenda. The Financial Times leads with Angela Rayner's resignation as Deputy Prime Minister in what the paper calls a tax scandal. The Guardian suggests Sir Keir Starmer is battling to contain a crisis, having undertaken today's widespread cabinet reshuffle, which the Mail is calling a nightmare on Downing Street. The Times calls it the Great Rayner Reshuffle. And one of the people on the ministerial merry-go-round is the new Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. The Eye points out that she'll now have to deal with the migrant situation. The Sun declares Ms Rayner simply sunk, and the Star depicts her and several Labour colleagues as clowns, but reserves the lettuce treatment for the Chancellor Rachel Reeves. Meanwhile, the Express quotes Reform UK leader Nigel Farage describing Labour as not fit to govern. The Telegraph appears to suggest the reshuffle leaves the government better positioned to respond to reform on key issues. But the Mirror rounds on Nigel Farage, accusing him of hypocrisy in his own alleged handling of stamp duty on one of his properties. He denies any wrongdoing. With me are Benedict Spence and Susie Boniface. So let's get straight to it. I think the vast majority of the papers focusing on this, Benedict. So let's start with The Guardian. Rayner goes. Well, actually, their headline, PM battles to contain crisis after Rayner forced to resign. Is there a crisis because she's gone? Or, as some are seeing it, the PM has turned a crisis into an opportunity?
I think that's a very charitable interpretation of it. I do think that
it was a question, not my interpretation.
Sure. I do think that it is a crisis because we're, 2 days after he put out that video message saying, here we go, ladies and gentlemen, it's phase 2. It was a bumpy start, but this is going to be a lot smoother now. And then, yeah, that went really, really spectacularly well. I can't wait for phase 3. You know, the gates of hell will literally open. It's a situation where he didn't want to lose his Deputy Prime Minister because she was a bit of a bulwark against the left of his party. She was sort of seen as the acceptable face of the left, if you like, and also able to keep things in check, you know, sweet with the unions. There was a lot to recommend her. Now we are going to get that situation where we have the contest to see who replaces her going forward. Perhaps this was an opportunity to bring forward a reshuffle that was coming anyway, to try to perhaps take the sting out of it and make it appear as though they are on the front foot. But that's still not what Keir Starmer wanted to happen. He didn't want to lose Angela Rayner. He didn't want this to happen this soon. He is perhaps trying to make the best of a bad situation, but I don't think you can get away from the fact that this is another rather embarrassing development.
And there she is, in happier times for her, walking alongside Sir Keir Starmer. The Times headline, Susie, the Great Rayner Reshuffle. I should just mention, by the way, a lot of them focus on what she wrote in her resignation letter. Of course, The Guardian has, for a teenage mum from a council estate, to serve at the highest level of government has been the honour of my life. But she is gone, and that doesn't really leave anyone from what you would call the traditional left of the Labour wing, left wing of the Labour Party, in government now.
No, it's very much quite Starmerite, and the reshuffle has been quite Starmerite. From a positive point, if you wanted to paint a positive glance on all this, if it's possible, I'll take the opposite view to Benedict. I don't think this is a crisis. I think there has been a crisis, but in a way, now it really is a reset. Before it was just some slight moving around of the deck chairs. Now, Keir Starmer can go, and the whole country goes, well, he has had to have a big clean out, and he started again. So there has been an excuse because a big beast has gone from his cabinet. He's had to been able to really shift things around. If it wasn't for her going, it would have been a bit more stagnant, perhaps, and so that reset has happened. You can also argue that what's happened here is that has completely squashed coverage of reform, and first big proper party conference that was going to be a more professional conference than a loose gathering of nuts and bolts, which we've had before. So that's done quite well, I suppose, if you're trying to put something good in it. But of course, it also seems chaotic because this is someone well, not someone he chose, but someone who's been given roles in his cabinet, who has survived previous reshuffles. It seems indecisive, which adds to his general indecision. And also you've got a situation now where the housing minister has managed to have a screw-up over buying a house. The homelessness minister made someone homeless not 5 minutes ago. And it's
when?
just, you do sort of tend to sort of sit and wait.
The corruption czar is on trial in another country for corruption. You know, it's not great.
The next thing. It's all a bit sticky. So it's not, none of this is a good look, shall we say. But I think the issue that I would be more concerned about if I were Angela Rayner is that the constituents of Ashton-under-Lyne, where she has been having regular constituencies and meetings and visits and everything else, have been probably given a very solid narrative and belief that her main problems are 260 miles away on the south coast.
Yeah.
And those are the people that elected her to serve them, and she needs to restore that link with them, I think, if it's possible, because there's a financial and an economic, a physical and a financial disconnect there with her voters, which she needs to sort out.
Your own paper, The Mirror, does lead on Nigel Farage's purchase of his home and his constituency. We'll get onto that later, by the way. We'll come back to that one later on because that is the only paper, I think, that's leading on a different story. You mentioned, Benedict, the potential election for a deputy leader of the Labour Party. Not the same thing, as of course, as the Deputy Prime Minister, which is David Lammy, but surely by being Deputy Prime Minister, that suggests that's who Keir Starmer would want to be, if they have one, the next deputy leader.
You'd assume that he would, at the very least, you'd assume he'd like it to be somebody who was sympathetic to him and to his viewpoint. Whether or not that ends up being the case, I mean, we were discussing this earlier, it doesn't have to be an MP, it just has to be a member of the party.
Yeah.
And of course that means that you get all the mayors, they come into play, all the sort of the former bigwigs are possibilities. You know, there's a whole wealth of options that the party could decide, do you know what, actually we don't like stability, we want to veer to the left, or we want to bring back somebody from the past.
From the left wing backbenchers, though, they're not happy now that she's not there, that, you know, that they're not represented.
And a lot of the unions won't be happy either, because
Yeah.
she was seen as that sort of conduit between Starmerism and that wing of the party. So, you know, it's really actually a delicate balancing act that he has to strike here.
Yeah, well, it's not up to him who the deputy leader is going to be. It's going to be up to the party.
Well,
he
they might
can
not
encourage.
have one at all. They've tried to not bother previously, I think, when Corbyn was leader.
Yeah, but you know, that's the thing. They could even, if they wanted to, the membership could say Tom Watson again, who's in the House of Lords, could be deputy leader again. But I think that, you know, one of the reasons why Starmer got elected as Prime Minister in the first place is because those people in the country that couldn't quite stomach voting for Starmer were voting because Angela Rayner was stood next to him.
Yeah.
And some people who couldn't stomach Angela were voting because Starmer was stood next to her. So he does need someone on the left. He is losing a lot of votes to the Lib Dems and the Greens, according to the polls. So he does have to shore up that part of his electoral coalition. Otherwise, he's stuck. And I think the Metro mayors are probably a good, sensible place to look, because there's one or two of them could take the fight to Nigel Farage.
Interesting stuff. Let's look at the Eye weekend, because they certainly shift things forward in terms of the effect of the reshuffle. Rayner loses her job as PM tells Mahmood, that's Shabana Mahmood, to stop boat migrants. Shabana Mahmood, the new Home Secretary. Benedict, does that suggest, even though that Yvette Cooper is now Foreign Secretary, that she didn't do the job as Home Secretary and Shabana Mahmood now has to do it?
I'd certainly say so. I don't think that Yvette Cooper ever cut a very convincing figure on it, whereas I think Shabana Mahmood will actually be a bit more hardline. I think that this is potentially...
That's her reputation. She's a tough cookie.
That's potentially one move where I think actually Starmer will be able to wheel her out as much as anything else. Ethnic minority, you know, similar to what Boris Johnson did with Priti Patel, although he used her more as a sort of a human flak jacket in the Home Office. But still, it's that ability to sort of turn out and say, here it is, it's a woman, it's an ethnic minority, and she's going to be tough, where other people haven't been tough before. You can't possibly say that I'm not taking this seriously. I tick absolutely every box. And I think Mahmood probably will come across as a much more sort of thorough Home Secretary than Yvette Cooper will. But, you know, beyond that, actually, I sort of look at some of the other, you know, decisions. I mean, as much as David Lammy being Starmer's deputy might sound like a good thing, actually, Lammy has done a surprisingly good job as Foreign Secretary. He's done a lot of work to build up a rapport, for instance, with J.D. Vance and other people, and now he's just been torn out and he's been put somewhere else, and now Cooper's got to come in.
They're both deputies in their own way, aren't
to
they?
A point, but there is the slight frustration, as is often the case with our system, that ministers aren't able to stay in post for very long, and actually that they just get their feet under the table when they're sort of wrenched out of their sockets and they're put in somewhere else. And either it's because you're doing a bad job but I can't afford to get rid of you, or you're doing a good job. Could you try doing a good job somewhere else and not finish that job?
That is a funny thing. Let's just take a bit of a step back from this. In no other businesses where you've done a good 7 to 9 months, you shifted into something else with a big leadership responsibility. But it seems to happen a lot with cabinet reshuffles. Like you say, if you've suddenly got your foot under the desk of the Home Office and now you're in the Foreign Office, that's a wrench. How do you get used to that?
It happens more likely when you're in government because there's been a problem like this. But a lot of the shadow cabinet have been in their briefs throughout the shadow cabinet years when they came into government. So Lammy has been at the Foreign... He was, making friends with Vance in opposition. John Healey was in defence in opposition. Yvette was at the Home Office and thinking about boats and getting a head around these problems for years before you get there. And all right, maybe in the past year it's not gone the way someone might want to in one department or another, but... If you get someone new in, they've literally just read up overnight on some of the policy issues.
Maybe that fishing was all for nothing in the Cotswolds.
Maybe.
We'll find out. Let's just finish off with the Daily Telegraph, Susie, because this is where it all started. We were discussing this last week, weren't we? They were reporting on the Angela Rayner story, and the other right-wing papers followed suit. But now, they say, interesting, exit Rayner, now Starmer takes the fight to reform. Does that sound even more like a supportive headline from the Telegraph for the government, or am I reading too much into that?
I don't know. I don't know how they're saying that he's taking the fight to reform by keeping Ed Miliband in the government and moving people around a bit. I think he's had a reset. That's worked. You've now got people like someone like David Lammy, for example, in charge of probably the most sensitive issue for the Prime Minister right this moment, which isn't small boats, it's the Hillsborough Law, which needs to be introduced to Parliament within the next couple of weeks before recess to go to conference. Otherwise, Labour are going to be having party conference in Liverpool without the Hillsborough Law. They promised to have delivered by April. And it's one of the very few full-fat, no-holds-barred promises Starmer made before his election. Now, Lammy actually signed an amendment confirming that in 2021, so he has to try and push that through as Justice Secretary.
That is one to keep an eye on. Thanks, Susie. Coming up is Nigel Farage guilty of hypocrisy over his own handling of stamp duty. As I said earlier, Susie's paper says yes. We'll discuss that next.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion that's just come down. I think it was a monster's just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks and taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change. We've been crushed.
Free from wherever you get your news.
We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first. Well, hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live. Joins us live all in one place, and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview here on Sky News. My guests, Benedict Spence and Susie Boniface. We're going to go straight back to your paper, Susie. I know you don't like me calling it your paper. It's your editor's paper.
I don't mind. I think my editor would probably mind.
The Daily Mirror. Because, yes, we do see a small picture of Angela Rayner there, but their focus is on Nigel Farage. Luxury house Farage boasted of buying was purchased by his partner, slashing the tax paid by $44,000 above the headline stamp duty. Hypocrite. Tell us more.
Well, the allegation is that obviously most MPs have a home in their constituency, which they rent or they own. Yeah. In Nigel Farage's case, it took him a while to move to Clacton, quite famously, and to hold a constituency surgery. And he hasn't, although he lives there, he has said, I have a house there, but he doesn't. He says, I have bought a house in Clacton. He hasn't. His girlfriend has bought the house in Clacton. Now, it's her first property. It's her primary home, according to the taxman, so she has just paid the normal stamp duty. The allegation is that because he owns, I think, about 4 houses, he should have bought it himself, if it's his constituency house, and he should be paying second home stamp duty, which, of course, is higher. But, of course, the allegation really depends on whether or not his girlfriend is using the home as a primary residence, or whether he just pops there once a month and she's never to be seen. That we don't know. It's not in the paper. He says it's a disgusting allegation, unfair and untrue, which is a very, very thorough and slightly overcooked response, I would suggest, as a denial. He says that she loves it in Clacton and that's as it is. And if that's the case, then all's above board, isn't it?
Yeah, she's called Laura Ferrari. And when asked if he had lent or given Ms Ferrari money towards the purchase, the 61-year-old, this I'm reading the report, by the way, said, I haven't lent money to anybody. It is her sole UK asset, but denied the arrangement had saved tax. Let's move on to the Mirror, page 5, and stay with the paper. But, Benedict, this one's for you to pick up on. Conference craziness. Because, of course, as you said earlier, Susie, all this reshuffle and Angela Rayner going hasn't necessarily overshadowed the Reform Conference. After all, Nigel Farage brought his speech earlier by 3 hours so he could respond to this. But what's the craziness they're talking about?
Well, I mean, you said that, that this was an opportunity for Keir Starmer to sort of, take away a bit of the glitz and the glamour from Reform. If anything, I think he's done Reform a massive favour because nobody's paying attention to what we saw. Now, this was the slightly more mild end of the spectrum, which is sort of, Nigel Farage is somewhere between Donald Trump and a WWE star, because, everything has to be very sort of Americanised and glitzy these days. Fortunately, he kept all of his clothes on, even though he is wearing a turquoise suit at some point in all of this, which is an exciting decision to go with. But there doesn't appear to have been an awful lot in terms of policy, even though we keep on being told, don't worry, the policy is coming at some point. It didn't come today. And we were also treated to Andrea Jenkins serenading the conference with, insomnia disturbing. I don't know.
It reminded me of
but
Theresa May's ABBA dance a little bit. It had that flavour of it.
But worse. She was wearing a sequined outfit, and she
seems to go out wearing a sequined outfit. She's the new Metro Mayor of, I think it's Lincolnshire, isn't it? And she always looks like she's trying to be Crystal Carrington in Dynasty.
It's a vibe, but it's might not be mine. But
it's a vibe, and it's on that vibe we're going to leave this for the time being. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, all the latest reaction to Angela Rayner dramatically quitting the government and triggering that major cabinet reshuffle we've been discussing. There's David Lammy, who moved from being Foreign Secretary to being Deputy Prime Minister, amongst other things.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's Senior Ireland Correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Fire, shouts the commander.
Force through!
There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky's security and defence editor.
Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.